Welcome to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and this podcast is your guide to start creating a lifestyle by design. From entrepreneurship, money and finance, taxes and residencies, and everything in between, this show highlights the nuances of a true global citizen lifestyle. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the show. Today's episode is actually an episode that I recorded with Andrew of Remote Tribe Life. So, this was a podcast episode for his podcast, for his community, and he dove deep and interviewed me on all things Latin America. We chose a few of the different and very lucrative options that I have been helping a lot of clients with lately. A few of those countries for residency, for citizenship, for real estate, and what that can look like. So, we dive into the details of these four countries that are specific to Latin America for his community. But I did want to release this episode on the podcast as well because it provides so much valuable information. And if you are ever interested in obtaining one or multiple of these residencies, citizenships, potentially having bank accounts in these countries and banking there, then definitely reach out to me. You know, all of my links are below, but let's dive into the episode.
I'm Andrew Williams, the founder of Remote Tribe. We are a digital nomad blog, newsletter, and we offer also services for wannabe global citizens, just like Nicole, who's our guest today. And she's also a global citizen. She is very into traveling and helping people with business, setting up businesses, especially in South and Central America. And we're here to talk about some really good opportunities for residencies, citizenships, and even business opportunities. So Nicole is on the ground. Where are you, Nicole, right now?
I'm in Paraguay right now.
Awesome. Like a lot of people, something is going on there. So I'm really looking forward to see
There
what's
is a
what's
lot going on here. Yeah, we were here probably about 9 months ago, but I had to come back for a few things because there's so much happening on the ground here.
also. So give us a few details about your background. I know you describe yourself as a global citizen strategist, which is very cool because I think describes really well what you do and what we do as well. And I think a lot of people have this dream of being very flexible with their lives. So give us a few details about you.
Yeah, for sure. So I am Nicole of Work, Wealth, and Travel. And what I do, you explained it perfectly. I sum it up as a global citizen strategist, but there's so many moving pieces to that. And it is unique depending on every individual situation and what their life looks like and what they're looking for. So I help with diversification options, whether that be obtaining additional residencies, citizenships, opening bank accounts around the globe, which is increasingly becoming so much more difficult and yeah, real estate, business structure, tax optimization, a lot of interest in Latin America and Central America. So I know we're going to dive into some of the beneficial programs that are offered in countries today. But it's not only limited to these countries, but there is so many more increasing lucrative programs that are being released here. And so myself and my partner, we've been traveling full time. I have been what I like to call a global citizen for the last 7 years now and we have been in Latin America for almost 2, and it's been really interesting being here and speaking with my network of lawyers and accountants and figuring out different systems and strategies that can be used to get residency or optimize your business tax, whatever that may look.
That's great. I mean, you're definitely the right person to talk to. First of all, just tell us why South and Central America are so hot right now when it comes to residencies and citizenships. What can they offer that Europe can't? I think I know, but I want to hear it from you, and maybe there's some things I'm missing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's such an emerging market. And it's also interesting because I think that the European programs and schemes have been advertised because Europe has always been so popular. But now the price point of living in Europe is changing. All this goes with all countries, but a lot of the requirements are changing as well. And so it's just not as lucrative. And a lot of these programs, like I said, in Latin America have been around for a while. They're not new. But because Europe is kind of going to the back burner a little bit more now and
Exactly.
is for those who are a little bit more high net worth, it's not so easy to just flip into a lot of those programs anymore. The Latin American market is taking dominance. And so it's really interesting to see and to have the conversations on the ground of how you can get the additional residencies, citizenships, tax breaks, different things like that while we've been here.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And that's the trend I see as well. So Europe is becoming more and more regulated. I think the expat programs, the relocation programs are quite expensive. You talk about Greece, Malta, Monaco, and all these places. They're pretty expensive and hard to get. Now they lost the Russian market as well because of the restrictions. So obviously people are looking for alternatives. And where there is a demand, there is a supply as well, the other way around. So absolutely, I think yeah, South America is on the trend right now. And let's start talking about Paraguay because you're there. So tell us what Paraguay has to offer for non-Paraguayan citizens and people who want to pay less tax.
Yeah, so Paraguay is a very unique country, I will say, in the sense that not many other countries operate similar to Paraguay. So the residency is, and if you're in this space, you've probably heard about Paraguay residency before. It's fairly straightforward to get. There are the temporary residence or the permanent residence option, depending if you want to invest in the country or if you just want to go kind of the general TR route, but not only for residency, it's also interesting for business setup as well. So they have a 10% flat territorial tax rate, which I mean, 10% is not bad. Of course, 0% is better, but you can also structure that through a few different businesses that are outside of Paraguay and then have that flow through into your personal residency. If your personal residency is here in Paraguay, then you can potentially get 0% tax. But they also do have a business set up here in Paraguay if you want a little bit more protection. It's good to kind of have something set up on the ground. Banking is also a huge struggle here if you are
That's what I've heard.
truly living here.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little bit easier if you do have the business structure, the EAS structure here to open a bank account, a business bank account, and a personal bank account. And that's at a 10% flat tax rate. So not a bad taxation rate. And it's
Hmm.
interesting because I cannot count the number of inquiries I get interested in Paraguay and interested in the residency only as a pathway to get citizenship. And while the residency is pretty straightforward, the citizenship is absolutely not. So just because one country, and I think this is a big misconception, just because one
Yeah.
country is fairly easy in one aspect doesn't mean that all the other aspects are going to
And
be
it makes sense because the passport is an important thing, right? I mean, you
mm,
can't really give passports to everyone, and
for
you have to go
sure.
through a few hoops. Whilst the residency is easy, as you said. So I think let's talk a bit more about the residency. So I think from what I remember, there's a temporary residency, then a permanent residency, and then if you want and fulfill the criteria, you can go towards the citizenship. So let's talk a bit about that.
Okay, so temporary residence, you have to show the very basic documents. So the criminal background check, the marriage certificate, the birth certificate, apostille, very standard documents for any process. And you will have to, as the law stands now, I always like to say because things can change and they have changed in the last year and 2 years. So as it stands right now, with the temporary residence, you only have to be in the country once every for the first 2 years, and then after those 2 years, it can transition into PR. So, fairly straightforward process, you do have to be on the ground, so it's more difficult. I don't know where your audience is predominantly from, but if you need a visa to enter Paraguay, then it gets tricky because offering the visa puts the liability on the person who is inviting you into the country. You need the invitation letter. So, it's a little bit more
Yes.
difficult if your passport country needs a visa to Paraguay. Can
So you
potentially
still
still be
need,
done.
yeah, you still need a stronger passport. However, if your passport is not that strong, there are ways around it, but it's going to be a bit more complicated, correct?
Yeah, more complicated and more costly. So it just depends really what your end goal here in Paraguay is. And then you can alternatively, instead of doing the TR, you can go right to the PR. So that requires a minimum $70,000 investment into the country in property, in a business. So you do have to have a business plan structured. It's not always so easily approved by the government, though. In the past, it
Hmm.
has been. Now it's more difficult. So we typically say, try the PR if you do want to start a business or invest in Paraguay, and you also do have to have proof of the funds as well. It can't just be, you think of Latin America and you're like, "Oh, I don't need to actually invest." You do need to actually invest. It can't just be a paper document. But if that isn't approved, which sometimes it will be, sometimes it won't be, we can't really say, unfortunately, then we'll just go the TR route.
All right. And so what happens after the 2 years when you're under temporary residency? Will you be granted the permanent residency after year two?
Yep, you'll get the permanent after year 2, of course, entering the country, as I previously stated, and then once you have PR, you are able to visit the country, or you have to visit the country once every 3 years to keep that active, and then
Yeah,
renew it once every 10 years. So I have some people coming to me and they're like, "That's not true. Permanent residency, I don't wanna have to go to the country every 3 or 10 years," and if you are looking into this world, there are always going to be requirements that you're going to
of
have to
course.
fulfill. I think a lot of people see a lot of these lucrative schemes and they think, "Oh, I can just get it online. I don't need to visit the country. I never have to go there again. I'll just pay for it and it'll be done." And you are becoming a resident or a citizen or having a bank account there. You do need some sort of physical, fiscal presence in the country.
Yeah, to be honest, it's not really that bad. If you think about it, like the price of a
Yeah.
flight ticket, it's maybe $1,000, right? And then you're saving up on tax a lot. So
Yeah.
it's really nothing. And I think it's fair. And I think it should be like that, in my opinion, for for all things to be very clear from both perspectives. Yeah,
I
and to
agree.
have some ties with that country. Yeah, I think it's like that everywhere, and people should expect to have some hurdles on the way. It's really not that because if it would be that simple, everyone would be doing it. So
Yeah.
you do need to work on that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Awesome.
not just like a one and done.
Yeah, and what I like about Paraguay is that it seems like it's a very peaceful country, and it's been like that for a while. Like I haven't heard a lot of things about Paraguay, like you had in Chile, like the riots you had in Chile, or like the protests in Argentina, and so on and so forth. So you've been there for a while. I know you've been back and forth a lot. So how is the lifestyle, and why are people enjoying it so much lately?
Yes, super relaxed, and it's funny you mentioned that because I was actually out to coffee with a client that I've worked with in the past last night, and I'm always very curious about people's perspective from the West because I haven't lived there in so long. I am not in the ground up to date on what is happening in the culture there and what that looks like. So he was giving me a bit of an insight from Canada on what that looks like. And he was saying, in Paraguay versus in Canada, it is so much freer. You can do absolutely anything you want. You feel like you have all of the rights, and it is a very libertarian country. Sometimes that can be beneficial and sometimes maybe not so much in certain senses. But you do have a sense of freedom and you can just go wherever you want, do whatever you want, have maybe a little bit more of that freedom of speech. But there also is I'm not going to say huge expat community, but there are definitely foreigners here from all over the world. And a lot of them
Hmm.
come for business. A lot of them will come for residence. But I find that a lot of the ones that really live here full time are not only here for the one and done residence. They actually like the relaxed, the slow lifestyle. I mean, Asuncion is the capital and it's a very small capital. So you will find a more relaxed pace of life, which some
Yeah.
like and some don't like.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I find pretty cool about Paraguay is that you've got Argentina close by if you want to have some fun, and it's a beautiful country as well. It's a bit
Yeah.
more hectic. You've got, like a higher energy there. So you can fly there in like 3 hours or so, which is pretty good. So talking about business in Paraguay, what are the most common business investments? What are people looking like to invest and have good returns in Paraguay?
Yeah, so Paraguay, in my opinion, is an interesting one for real estate. If you're looking to get into real estate, you can invest in bonds and stock market here. Probably bonds would be the only thing that I would recommend, quite honestly. And that's a good tie if you are living here or you have residence. You want to establish those ties with the country. So you do want to invest, a little bit of money. But if you are looking to really invest, if the market looks right for you, I guess I'll say the trajectory in Paraguay in Asuncion, it is such a great starting market because it's so low. When you compare it to any other country in Latin America, this is the lowest cost. And I've been meeting with a few different realtors here, and it's been very interesting to see. So you can buy land for I wanna say 10 to 15,000 at the lowest, and of course, it can go higher if you're looking for a more established area in a complex, potentially. I've seen that going up to 200,000 minimum. So there are options, but if you are getting started, I don't think it's really feasible to get started in a Western country anymore,
Yeah,
and that was a conversation we were having last night as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think Gen Zs are totally compromised because they're gonna,
Yeah.
they're never gonna climb the ladder. I believe prices will go up and up and up, and it's gonna be very hard to buy a flat in Europe somewhere, even a small flat. So unfortunately, yeah, I think you're right. So do you need a permanent residence to be able to buy land there? Who can buy land in Paraguay?
No, you don't need a residence to buy land in Paraguay, although most people will get the residence just because it is so easy. For the business structure, you do need residence, but there's always ways around it where we can, put it in someone else's name and then transition it over to you in the future.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, that sounds interesting. So in terms of, I guess, is the population growing in Asunción, or like what's going on there? Like I understand the prices are small, but why are so?
I wouldn't say I'm too optimistic about the economy, quite honestly. There is a lot of money laundering and corruption. So there are some fintech banks that are now popping up, which I am always cautioning people to open, but be careful about it.
How much
There's
money are you keeping them? Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be careful. And once you've really had conversations with the locals on the ground, you can really see the scope of things and what it looks like. Whereas from the outside, as a foreigner, not really knowing it, it looks great, but that's not always the reality. So it depends. In my opinion, if you are planning to build a life here and if this is a city and a country that you really do enjoy, and it is still very much so a developing country, then real estate is a better investment because the trajectory of what it's going to look like in the future, I don't know. And one thing that I do like to caveat as well is yes, there's a really lucrative residency program here now, but it doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way. So yeah, there's more foreigners coming in now. Is that going to look the same in 5 or 10 years? I don't know.
By
So
the way,
there's
is the permanent residency guaranteed by the government if you have it for 10 years? Can they change their mind in year seven, for example? Is that
It's permanent. Once you have it, you are a
okay?
resident, so anybody else who would be applying would be subject to any new rules, but if you've already acquired it, then it's yours to be acquired. Again, governments, we don't know what that's going to look like, and that's why what I do is I help clients to be able to diversify. So not only be in the Paraguayan market, but to have various options. And if you do choose to leave your home country and if you do choose to go on this path, I like to consider it as a game because it really truly is. You have to piece all of the pieces together. You have to figure out where is best for the business, where is the best multiple residency options, where can you start working towards citizenship, where can you have personal bank accounts, where can you have business bank accounts. There's a lot of things that come into play. It's not just as simple as Paraguay one and done. If you're living here, perhaps, but that's not the case for most people who are
Yeah.
interested in this program.
Yeah, I think a lot of people want to have options, and Paraguay is one of them, but not necessarily, forever or for life. So
Yeah.
yeah, cool. Great. So that's Paraguay. I believe it's the entry level in South America. If I'm not wrong, it's one of the most affordable and fastest, to be honest. I think we also have Uruguay there, and you know a bit about Uruguay too. So let's chat about that. Let's chat about residency in Uruguay next.
Yeah. Okay. So Uruguay, they don't have temporary residence, but you can go right into PR, which is nice, very nice, but you do need to live there for a set amount of time. So I usually, to give it a bit of buffer, I like to say 6 to 10 months, and that can depend on bureaucracy is such a thing in these countries. So you never know what the actual wait time is going to be. It's recommended to not leave the country once you have started the process in Uruguay because it will just elongate the process, unfortunately, so much more. So you will want to, get a lease there. You can obtain tax residence if you stay for 6 months or more per year. So for some that's feasible, for some not so much, but you can just obtain the personal residence. And then once you have that, again, you only need to enter the country once every 3 years.
All right. All right. So I think people should be prepared for a bigger initial time investment in Uruguay if they're committed. However, I think Uruguay is even more stable than Paraguay, definitely. So probably one of the most stable countries in South America. They call it the Switzerland of South America for a reason. And yeah, so okay, so that's that. And then how
I
about
did just wanna
banking?
note as well
Yeah.
on that process, and then I'll definitely touch on banking. The process for the documentation for Paraguay is we touched on it, is so simple. In Uruguay and in most countries, it's not going to be that
Mhm.
simple, so don't expect just because you got your residency in Paraguay and right now the process is fairly straightforward. There is quite a bit more documentation needed in Uruguay and in all of the other countries. So one size
And
does
but
not fit all.
Yeah, fair enough. Absolutely. And one thing that I think it's important to mention is how, I mean, do you have any obligations after you get your permanent residency? Do you have to submit any kind of tax filing, a VAT return as a person, not as a company in these countries?
If you live there, you will be required to, or I should say you should if you live there. So when you're here, for example, they'll always ask you if you want a factura at the end of every purchase. And so if you live here, then yes, you do have to remit that money back.
Mm.
If you are simply here for the purposes of residence, you're hanging out in the country for 1 or 2 months or less per year, and you're not really living here, then we will just file zero. But if you're trying to open a bank account or really get any real substance in the country, that's not gonna fly.
All right. All right. So you do need some kind of minimum accounting if you spend some time in Paraguay, basically.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, interesting. Okay. So just going back to Uruguay, from what I've heard, the banking system is much better than in Paraguay. So how do we define a good banking system in Uruguay and how can you open up a bank account?
Yeah. Yes. Definitely Uruguay has one of the best banking systems, very reliable just because of the way that they have set up their banking system. They are very heavy on AML process, so anti-money laundering, which is more documentation in the beginning, but is really beneficial in the end because they really only have high quality clients. And that is, I like to think, reflected in the fees. So you're probably looking at starting at around 40 US dollars for just a standard personal checking account, and that's the
Hmm.
monthly fee. So if you're comparing that to like a Canada or America or any other country down here, it's going to be a little bit higher, but you really are getting quality banking that you actually do not even need to be a resident to open it, which is nice, but you do need to physically be there in person. Have a few
Hmm.
documents. It's not a rigorous process, not as many documents as the residency in Uruguay, but you do need to bring some documentation. Of course, the AML, they want to know where is that money coming from? What is the deposits going to look like monthly and whatnot? But it is definitely more secure.
Hmm.
And I guess I mentioned the process. So it's fairly straightforward, but it is something that you have to do in person.
Is there a minimum amount that you have to bring in the country or in the bank to open the accounts initially?
Are you interested in becoming a global citizen and living a lifestyle by design in a country that aligns with you? If this is a lifestyle that you're seeking to create, we can help. Whether it be multiple residencies, citizenships, bank accounts, trust or company formations, we operate in 30 plus of the most tax friendly jurisdictions around the globe to get you structured properly. Head to the link in the show notes to learn more and to get your global citizen journey underway today.
Nope, there's no minimum depending on who you get for the banker and in all of these countries, and in I think most countries, it's gonna depend who you speak to. So depending on who you
Hmm.
speak to, they might require a little bit more capital. But with our team, there is no minimum, but they do wanna know where that money is coming from, how much is estimated to be in the account each month, just so if anything goes over, they're on the lookout. But per se, there is no minimum.
Yeah, when it comes to wire transfer, banking, how are things there?
Yep, that's all available. And in Paraguay as well, that's all available. It just depends on what your limit could be, if you do have any limits and what that could look like, but wire transfers, anything like that is all available. What I usually say, it's not so much those big banks because they do have all the normal services, the wire
Yeah.
transfers and whatnot. It's more so if you have a personal bank account in a fintech bank like a Wise or a Revolut or something like that, they might not be accepting. I know Paraguay is no longer on Wise. So that's not gonna be an option for you. So it's more so the side of the fintech that you have to look into before opening a bank account than the actual established bank account, because these are all real banks. It's just like a Chase
Yeah.
or a Bank of America. They have all of these similar features. Credit card.
Any kind of foreign banks in like Spanish banks like Santander are present in Uruguay?
I'm not too sure. We open with one of the biggest banks in South America because I know that that process is pretty straightforward, but I haven't actually been on the ground in Uruguay, so I'm not too sure exactly which banks are there, but there are quite a few of the bigger ones that are here in Latin America, and then we'll try for Uruguay, we will open it at one of the bigger banks. For Paraguay, it depends, so we'll try to open it at one of the bigger banks like an Itaú or something like that. But again, it's unfortunately very circumstantial because it can be difficult.
Yeah, gotcha. Opening up a company in Uruguay, what does that mean? Is that an option for people who want to do business with the world or just in South America? How should one go about it?
Yeah, so Uruguay has the free zone companies, which I actually don't hear talked about enough. And it's a really
Um,
interesting option if you are looking to, of course, establish some sort of true business on the ground. And it can be a good or it can be a service as well. There are stipulations. So you do need to hire, 75% of the workforce needs to be Uruguayan. There can be certain exceptions made depending on the business activity and whatnot. Typically, that's how it goes. There can be exceptions made depending on certain circumstances. But with that, you will be completely tax free in the business. So that is nice. Of course, you have to pay the employees, the social security and whatnot, which is pretty standard, but the business itself is tax free. And then also in saying that Paraguay also has a really great and lucrative scheme. If you are again having products, services in the country, they have maquila law. So I'm actually posting a video very shortly on my channel about what that looks like, but you can get a 1% export tax, which is extremely beneficial. Brazil is right beside us here in Paraguay. So if you're looking to export, especially to a Brazilian market, or in America, those are usually the 2 most common countries that we see the exports going to, but you can benefit from potentially 1% in Paraguay or tax-free in Uruguay.
that's a very good tip, especially because yeah, I think there's a lot of farmland in Uruguay. From what I know, there's a lot of farmland per capita. The country's relatively small population. However, the amount of land that's available for agriculture is huge. So there's a lot of opportunity on that side. How about like doing commerce with Europe and Africa from Uruguay? Is that an option at the
Totally.
moment?
Yeah, 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 it can be anywhere in the world. Of course, Uruguay and Paraguay are both Mercosur countries, so
Yeah,
doing business is a little bit easier with those
is there?
countries, but from anywhere in the world, there's no restrictions.
Cool. And is that a common like opening up a company in Uruguay? Is that a common thing right now? Do you see like the trend going up lately?
It's for certain businesses. So if you and this is the thing too, I think not a lot of people know about these, and that's why I'm talking about them more on my channel because there just isn't enough people talking about it, in my opinion, but it is for a certain company. So if you are establishing an assembly line, if you are going to have a product that you are going to be finishing the assembly in a Paraguay or an Uruguay, and maybe you need a factory, then it would be a good setup for you, and then you benefit from that low or no export tax rate, but you can also do it with services. So it depends on the service, and it depends, of course, you would have to live in that country, but you can also use maquila law, you can use a free zone company for services as well. It doesn't just need to be where you buy or rent an entire factory and have an assembly line, so there are options.
Yeah, that's definitely good to know. I think people already got some ideas about what to do in Uruguay. It's kind of companies. It's great. Yeah, it's definitely when it's on the table. Like you can definitely mix Uruguay and Paraguay in some kind of holding or like a mix between residencies and company opens and stuff like
For
that.
sure.
So that's really good. You told me something before the show about the possibility of getting a passport in Uruguay, but not the citizenship. How is that even possible?
Yeah. So Uruguay is, I think, the only country that unfortunately, differentiates the citizenship. So you can have a natural and then a legal citizen. So if you're born in the
Yeah.
country, you're a natural citizen. If you if you get the residency and you live there and you meet the requirements for the passport, then you can potentially get the Uruguayan passport, so the travel document, but not the citizenship.
So you
Unfortunately,
can't be
those are two.
naturalized. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah. So
Exactly.
you'll get your passport based on the residency, but not on the naturalization certification that
Yeah, yeah, you'll get the
people get.
travel document because you
Yeah,
are a tax resident, that is your home, you are integrated into the culture, but you will unfortunately never truly be Uruguayan. There are people in Uruguay who are fighting against that, but it's just not very well known, and I don't really think the government is too worried about it, quite honestly, so I don't see that changing. Uruguay, in my opinion, is one of the easier passports to get in this part of the world, but that is a big hindrance to a lot of people as well, so just depends on
yeah.
your situation and what you
Correct.
want.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. That's very good to know. I think the passport is good enough. I think it's a strong passport. I'm not sure if it's as strong as the European one, but still, it's kind of a neutral country. I think a lot of people wish to have that one or start with that one as a second passport. Passport is
Yeah,
not that
definitely.
strong, so attempt to look for in South America for sure. Cool. So I think we covered Uruguay. Next one on the list, the neighbors, just a few hours away by water bus is Argentina. A lot of exciting things happening in Argentina. Some people are worried. Some people are very excited about the new president, Milei. So you've been there recently, if I'm not wrong. What's going on in Argentina? So what's your view on that? Should we be worried about what's going on politically? Like, president is definitely libertarian. They're also talking about the residency program and maybe a citizenship program. So what's going on there?
Yeah. Okay. So Argentina is an interesting one, and a lot of people want to live there or get residence or citizenship there. I don't live in speculation. So I see the news, I read it, but really what happens on the ground is what I go based off of. So as of now, there have been no changes for the residency, for the citizenship. Will that change in the future? I don't know. So I always try to make that clear whenever I'm working with somebody of this process can take multiple years and the process may change. So that's always something to look out for. On the ground in Argentina, it's so interesting. I was there probably about 6 months ago. So it was the middle of elections. There was buses and it was crazy for the election, but it was the first round of elections. So that was with the old president and the inflation, the economy, the homelessness that you see on the street. I don't know if you've been there recently, but it is a very unique place to be.
Hmm.
Utilizing the blue dollar is, of course, beneficial for foreigners, but it brings down the local economy in the long run. And it was interesting because my partner does a lot of street interviews and he speaks Spanish very well. So he was speaking to a lot of the people, the locals on the street, young people, 20, 30, and asking them like, what is the blue dollar to you? Do you know what that means? And a lot of them didn't even know what that was. And
Wow.
so it
So
was
that's
very,
to- yeah, totally a parallel economy that a lot of people don't even know. So here you go.
yeah. Yeah. Whereas for foreigners coming into that country, a lot of us are not even going to use any type of currency unless it comes from the blue dollar. And we know to bring
Correct.
US money and exchange it and where to go or kind of a general basis of what that entails. But it was really interesting to me that the locals don't really seem to have an understanding. And I find in a lot of these countries, they just go about their life, which there's nothing wrong with that. They go about their life and they try to make ends meet and they live their life and that's that. But when you're coming from a global perspective, of course, you want to take advantage of all of the options that you could potentially have.
Yeah, it's definitely unfair for the locals, and I think it's leaned a lot towards foreigners at the moment that take advantage of this. I honestly, I think from an ethical perspective, it shouldn't be like that. I mean, it's too much. Obviously, having parallel economies and having, yeah, it's pretty obvious the situation is not really good. I'm just saying that, but yeah, we definitely have to be considerate when we go there and be very respectful and yeah,
Yeah.
just behave well. I haven't been
And
there in a while. Yeah,
it was interesting just on that point as you were speaking, we had a really great tour guide when we were there, and I do not know about all the different currencies that they have, but she was mentioning that they have, I think it was 300 different rates. And so one of them was the Coldplay dollar, one of them was the Taylor Swift dollar. So it's just based on like who is coming into their economy, how much money are they bringing? There's also
it's
the MEP
crazy.
rate. There's the MEP rate, which I was questioning because I don't always wanna use cash, I wanna use my card for a lot of things, and so you do get some discount, not as good as the blue dollar rate, but when you use your card, you do get some discount, so that was my question, I'm sure a lot of others, if you're traveling, you'll have that question, but yeah, there's 300 around that, different exchange rates, which, I mean, that just shows the state of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting what's going on there. I think that's why a lot of people are very excited right now because they feel like it's time for a cleanup and this is the right guy to do it, the new president.
Yeah,
But we'll have to see about that. I mean, I think it's a bit too early to invest in Argentina. If you ask me, I think this year is going to be very big. I think we're going to see a lot of protests. We're going to see a lot of people in the street. That's my view because there will be a lot of changes, especially the social programs that have been running for years and years. And
for sure.
is as soon as someone wants to change something that is set in stone, it's very difficult. So I plan to visit Argentina at the end of the year. I'm going to give myself a year to wait. I really don't want to be in the middle of. I don't think it's going to get dangerous. I just think it's going to be a bit unstable, so to say. So that's what I would advise people as well, just to put out the situation and don't hurry. Also, it's going to take some time for the economy to adjust after the new measures are coming in. They signed a lot of decrees, so it will take, I think, between 6 months and maybe a year and a half to see some changes. However, you don't want to go too late because it's going to get expensive probably soon. So just
I
just
think
keep
it
an eye
already
on that.
has. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement in the market. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on that. But yeah, and also keep an eye on the residency and the citizenship program if they're gonna release one. For now, they're just rumors as far as we know. And yeah, see you in Argentina, I guess.
Yeah, so
Um,
Argentina, actually, just to touch on that briefly, not as straightforward as Paraguay or Uruguay, but there is temporary and then permanent residence and then citizenship that you can get as well. So similar to like in Uruguay, if you're on the ground for a certain amount of years. Again, not as straightforward. So it does depend on the visa that you enter on, if you are an investor, if you have a business. So there's different ways that we would have to look at, or we do look at your specific situation and figure out what's the best way for you to enter. But it is pretty straightforward to get residency. But if you want to get citizenship, which you can in about 2 to 3 years' time, I like to say with bureaucracy, it could be a little bit more, but officially it's 2 years, which is very straightforward. You do have to live there, you do have to pay tax there. So there are options if Argentina is really of interest to you, which I know, at least in the past, it has been for quite a few people. You do have options if you're willing to live there to actually get the passport fairly
that
easily,
makes
really,
sense. So there are programs already that offer that.
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, my bad. I wasn't aware. I thought they were just rumors, but it seems like there's something already there. So
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Really.
However, yeah, the downside is that you do have to leave in Argentina. How long do you have to? Is it like minimum 6 months a year or the 180 days rule or
So you can get temporary residence, pretty straightforward, and you don't have to be a tax resident. If you get permanent residence, then you do have to be a tax resident. So you do have to live there and pay taxes there.
yeah,
And then, of course, to get the citizenship, you have to be coming from the PR and you have to have been in the country living there for 2 years. So you have to
yeah,
spend time on the ground at least 6 months a year, be a tax resident, all the very normal things. But 2 years is a very expedited amount of time. But with bureaucracy, and I've had people being like, "That's not true." It depends on the case, it depends on
yeah, sure.
the amount of money, the visa that you're gonna be on, but I like to say 2 to 3 years because we don't really know what that's gonna look like with bureaucracy in these countries.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Cool. I think we can move on to the next one. We had another one on the list, and that's Costa Rica. I've been there recently, I think about 2 years ago. Beautiful country, quite small, private, quiet, I would say. So what's going on there in terms of residencies and citizenships? How does the program look like?
Yeah. Yeah, so similar to Argentina, there are a few different ways that you can enter the country. There's also a digital nomad visa, which is nice, but
Yeah.
that does not lead into anything, so depending what you're looking for, if you're looking for a short term to stay there for a bit, great. If you really are obtaining residencies or wanting to be on the ground for it to lead to something, unfortunately, that won't be the case in Costa Rica. But there are a few different ways to get residency. So you can invest in the country. I believe it is $150,000 to start at the investment, which is pretty reasonable. You can have a minimum salary, 2,500 at the time of recording. Always subject to change. Likely it'll be
Yeah.
going up. It won't be going down. So that's why I recommend like get started now if any program is of interest to you. And then the pensioner program. So if you are receiving a lifetime pension of $1,000, then you can also qualify. And then you can in 7 years' time potentially get the citizenship after you've lived there for 7 years. Or if you are in a lot of countries, if you have a spouse from that country, they will expedite the process. So it's a few less years for you.
Okay. So the Rentista program is their residency program. Is that is that right? Okay. And how long do you have to be in the country to keep the residency, or how often do you have to go there?
Yeah. So for these programs, you
Can you hear
will
me,
need to.
Nicole?
Yeah. 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 Oh, are we good?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So for these programs, you will need to live in the country and then you do become a taxpayer. There's also social security costs to think of as well. So that'll be a few $100s. Unfortunately, I've had some clients who just because of that alone, they are not interested. So there is some additional fees, but yeah, it just depends on the lifestyle you're looking for. And if Costa Rica is the place for you, it's probably worth it for an extra few $100s a month.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, definitely Costa Rica is an option. I think a lot of people know that. I mean, it's again, it's a small country, but they have a quite a high standard of living. It's quite peaceful. It's a low key country. They care about nature a lot. So if you're a nature lover, it's definitely a nice place to retire. It's quite warm most of the time, and yeah, compared to other countries in the region, is quite safe and it's quite close to the U.S. more or less. It's pretty close if you want to fly back home. So I did see a lot of Americans retire there, probably part of that retirement visa. And yeah, probably gonna feel like home in some places. There are a lot of communities from, the Swiss community to the American community there. So the US community. Pretty sure. Yeah, quite touristy as well, depending on where you live, but a good option. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Fresh foods, good stuff.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
awesome. Yeah, so those are kind of a lot of the main options that I have people coming to me for, but of course, almost every country here in Latin America, there's some sort of program. So it just depends on your lifestyle and really what you're looking for.
Is there any kind of upcoming visa that we're all waiting for in Central or South America at the moment, like announced recently?
I guess it depends on who you ask and what they would be looking for. As far as I know, there's been nothing that has been recently announced just because most of these countries already have something established. I know and again, they're only continuing to increase. I know at the beginning of this year, the Mexican residency programs increased. So I don't think new so much, but more so just changes coming to the
Yep.
programs that are already out and probably not for our benefit.
Yeah, I see. I see what you mean. I mean, there were some problems in the Caribbeans recently with the scandal of the passports and how they gave the passports, the background checks and everything. So it seems like that part of the world is changing a bit. Not all the Caribbean countries have this issue right now where they can't accept applications anymore. But just be careful who you talk to and what kind of passport you applied for. I don't know if that problem was fixed, but what do you know so far about the Caribbean countries and programs? Nicole, is there any
Yeah.
major change happening there?
Yeah, okay. So we have a great team on the ground in the Caribbean. And to preface, what I usually ask clients when I'm talking to them is, what is your end goal? And for a lot of them, it's citizenship. And if you are looking for a citizenship with almost no time on the ground, low taxation, current access to the EU, I was talking to my team about this. They don't really see that changing because of some of the new implementations that the EU has given to these islands. But if you're looking for a low cost passport starting at 150,000, the Caribbean is the best option by far. And because St. Kitts and Nevis increased their pricing last year in 2024, nothing is confirmed. But after having conversations with the team in 2024, it's likely that a lot of these islands are also going to increase their prices, as of course we would expect. So right now, I mean, $150,000 for a passport is not a bad
Yeah,
price,
especially
and
with the
that's
inflation
starting.
we have. Yeah, especially with the inflation we have in the US
Yeah,
and in Europe, it's probably like still half the price, like
yeah.
if you count it in old money, so to say.
Definitely,
Absolutely.
definitely, and I
Yeah,
have
it's
a lot of
just
clients, they don't really
mhm.
see the value in that, and for me, I like, jump on that if that is of interest to you. There is more behind the scenes due diligence that is going into that process. So I personally and my team don't foresee any major changes to country access, let's say, in the future. They are being compliant with the EU and other bodies that are OECD who are kind of, looking at these countries and
Yeah.
wanting to have some more regulation and AML behind it. So they are in complete compliance.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two biggest advantages of these Caribbean passports are that you don't have to spend time there, and two, you've got access to the EU, which is a big thing for a lot of people. So still very hot, absolutely. It's just that they're obviously a bit more expensive than the other ones that you can go through residency, which is takes more time and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I guess it
But
depends how you see it. In my opinion, I see them as being pretty affordable just because you don't have to spend time on the ground. And a lot of people come to you, they don't want to spend time on the ground or they can't spend time on the ground.
yeah.
So unless you're ready to commit minimum 2 years, if not more, on the ground, which most people don't really want to do, then it's a really good option.
Cool, cool. It's good to have them on the table still. That's fantastic. We're gonna leave a few links under the in the description here in the video. I think one thing I wanted to touch upon at the end, Nicole, was the birth tourism. So I know there's it's quite big in our community. A lot of people are talking about that. So I think just to keep it short, like how does it work? And then which countries in South America and Central America offer that?
Yeah. Birth tourism is an awesome and I think again not really enough talked about option because it can look very daunting when you
Yeah.
are going through the process. But once you actually get in it, and we've helped clients with this as well, depending on the countries of interest for them, it's not quite so daunting as you may think. You do have to narrow down the countries that may work for you. And some countries will offer parents residency, some countries flat out just won't. In all cases, the child will get the passport if they are born in a specific country that offers birth tourism and offers a citizenship from the soil, but not all of them will, unfortunately. So in Latin America, there are probably the most options. I believe there's around 30, 35 countries right now that offer birth tourism. So most of the countries down here in this part of the world, Uruguay, Paraguay, Chile, Argentina, Costa Rica, like all the ones we've talked about, plus more, Brazil. You also have your Canada, you have America, you have Mexico, you have a few different places in Europe, in Central Asia. So there are options, but again, it's figuring out what the goal looks like for you. Of course, the child who's born there will get citizenship. You want to make sure the parents are going to be able to get residency, which can then sometimes,
Exactly.
after living there for a certain amount of time, transition into citizenship. You usually have to become a taxpayer. You have to live there for 2, 3, 4 years. So there is from the parents' side, there is a bit of work that goes into the process, but it's amazing that the child just gets granted immediate citizenship in any country that you could potentially choose.
Yeah, and is that like a well-defined program, or is just you go there on your own and then you look for a clinic? How do these programs work?
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward in the sense that once you've narrowed down the country that makes the most sense for you for various different reasons, you will find the hospital that works for you and of course, the price point and the service and whatnot. You'll find the doula, the whatever, have the baby, register the birth certificate, and then once the birth certificate is registered, they are then entitled for a passport. So there is a bit of bureaucracy. Some countries, depending on the country, will need you to bring in additional documents before you give birth. So that's why we recommend know the country that you are going to be going to and understand what that process looks like. A few countries as well, they will if you are there as a tourist or if you're there on a tourist visa, they will not grant citizenship or residency whatnot for the parents as well. So you want to do a little bit of research. It's not just all of these countries offer it and I can go to any of them, but the process is pretty straightforward where you go there, you give birth, you register the birth, and then comes the bureaucracy part of it, where you have to
Yeah.
wait for the citizenship and wait for the residency, and that can take a little bit longer.
I see. That's why I asked you because I know a lot of in a lot of countries you can't really go on a tourist visa, so you have to plan a bit. And also, I think the parents should also think about what is the process looking like for them after the baby is born, if they want the residency there, or so there is a lot of preparation, and also I think a lot of a lot of thought about how you want to integrate that country in your portfolio of the lifestyle because it will become part of your lifestyle if your kid has the citizenship over there.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was great to chat, Nicole. Thanks a lot for sharing all these things with us. I think you said a lot of very interesting things that haven't been said before on our podcast. How can people get in touch with you? Because you're very, very strong on the ground there, and maybe someone wants to get in touch. So how can they do that?
Yeah, for sure. So all my links, I'm sure they will be left below. My email, I like to give people direct access to my email because that's where we usually go back and forth, or my WhatsApp, but you can join my WhatsApp or Telegram communities and then message me from there. But my email is nicole@workwealthandtravel.com. So if you have any questions, if you're thinking that any of these options sound interesting to you, you want to start diversifying banking as well, depending on the country, you have some potential options or potentially not. So you want to figure out what the holistic picture is going to look like before you just show up in a country on the ground. It's part of the game, as I like to say. So you have to play
Mhm.
the game. You have to know what the moves are going to be. So you can reach out to me. My email.
You've just listened to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. If anything from this episode resonated with you, I would appreciate if you share this podcast on your socials. And of course, be sure to tag me. And don't forget to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me on this global citizen journey, and I'll see you in the next episode. Are you interested in becoming a global citizen and living a lifestyle by design in a country that aligns with you? If this is a lifestyle that you're seeking to create, we can help. Whether it be multiple residencies, citizenships, bank accounts, trust or company formations, we operate in 30 plus of the most tax-friendly jurisdictions around the globe to get you structured properly. Head to the link in the show notes to learn more and to get your global citizen journey underway today.